Special Agent Lin is driving through Hong Kong when he receives a call from his daughter's doctor explaining that she may not make it through tonight's procedure because of her leukemia. Lin pledges to be there shortly and picks up the pace, weaving in and out of traffic and even crossing the sidewalk. Agent Susan calls him shortly after to report a difficulty with witness protection. Geneticist Dr. James recently turned against the government after 5 years of working on biochemical weapons development with an arms dealer. James is apparently hiding with an extremely strong mechanical heart after killing everyone in the facility, including the armaments dealer. His whereabouts was revealed, thus he needs to be sent to a military installation right now. Lin wants to say no, but he turns the car around and leaves his dying daughter behind because this is an issue of national security. James is injected in the meantime and begins to have hallucinations. When the agents come to take him and the heart away, he is hardly responding at all. In an attempt to keep safe, the squad creeps around the buildings, but as soon as they return to their truck blows up. A little robot creeps across the ground, reaches another automobile, and causes it to explode as well, all while everyone runs for shelter. Agents begin to die one by one as soon as someone starts fire. James is about to be shot by Andre, who appears to be leading a group of soldiers in black armor, but Lin intervenes in time to stop him. The spies keep firing in an attempt to retaliate, but the enemy's armor is too formidable, and shortly Andre shoots another car, leaving the agents without cover. After taking a bullet to the shoulder, Lin orders Susan to take James while he continues to battle. Lin intervenes to save a fellow agent, after another agent fires a flash bomb to divert attention, but the man is shot when they get to the other side. When the other members of the squad attempt to flee with James, Andre obstructs their path with another explosion. The group loses the heart when the agent holding the container containing the heart gets shot in the thigh. When the group tries to flee, Andre blows up another truck, sending them flying back. Lin slides again to continue shooting. Subsequently, Lin fires a unique net at an adversary. An additional agent attempts to leap on him, but the adversary shoots him down. Lin tries to break up the fighting between the agents and troops, but she is also shot down. Andre then sets off one final explosion, which turns the tide of the battle in his favor. After Andre fires the guards that are advancing James, Susan chooses to use her knife to fight him while demonstrating impressive martial arts prowess, and James crawls in the direction of the container. Regretfully, Susan is overcome by Andre, who chokes her and then throws her against the wall to knock her unconscious. Andre is pinned against an oil tank, when Lin, riding in a car, knocks into him as he goes to ask James for the container. Unfortunately, Andre is still alive. As Lin continues to shoot him, he begins to push and even pull the car back. Lin fires at the oil tank instead of the bullets since they are ineffective, and the massive explosion that results knocks them both down. Spitting blood, Lin's thoughts turn to his daughter, who is currently flatlining in the hospital. James answers the call from the doctor after he passes out. Author Rick writes a book called Bleeding Steel about an American Marine who has a mechanical heart installed in blood that carries memories from his past 13 years later in Australia. When a working woman arrives at Rick's building in the evening, the security guards get overly nosy before allowing her to pass. While gradually coaxing Rick into consuming booze laced with a sedative, the woman promises him a show. The woman exposes herself to be Lee Sen, in disguise once he has fallen asleep. He is a hacker who entered Rick's computer to obtain data. The general leads Andre's soldiers as they arrive, and the general assaults the guards right away. The general kills one of them instantly, while the other escapes upstairs and is slain by a knife just outside Rick's door. When Lee Sen hears the commotion, she flees to hide. Rick is stabbed awake by the general as she enters the room, and she asks him where he got the idea for his novel. When Rick first won't tell, she electrocutes his skull while a soldier looks through the safe. A warrior wearing a mask breaks through the window as the crew discovers a bathtub filled with water. He tosses one soldier onto the table, uses a tiny explosive to bring down the other, and then ducks behind a funny-looking chair as the general opens fire on him. The general then proceeds to attack him straight after he has thrown the chair at her. The general is knocked unconscious by the strange warrior after much conflict, in which they fight over the gun and shoot down a recuperating soldier. After being questioned by the man in a mask, Rick acknowledges that he stole the narrative, and that the original files are on his laptop. Rick is killed when the masked man avoids the general's blade, as she abruptly wakes up and launches another attack. Using the laptop as a shield, he battles her, and after exchanging blows, he detonates an explosive on the machine before giving it to her. When the general discovers, he tosses it towards the ceiling, smashing the large lights. The general leaps out of the window and lands on a car, but before she can turn around and check that the man has left, she hears the police sirens. Lee Sen emerges from the bathtub in the flat where he has been hiding. Before making his getaway through the back door, he grabs some items from the safe, takes his memory stick from the desk computer, and gathers fragments from the damaged laptop. The man in the mask visits his house at the same moment, and reveals himself to be Lin. As he tends to his injuries, he discovers from the news that the police think Rick was murdered during a heist. Lee Sen is the main suspect because security footage shows him exiting the premises. The following day, the general shows Andre the hacked video, and he uses a program to determine that Lin was the man in the mask. The general kept tabs on Lee Sen's disguise purchases as well. In the interim, Lee Sen mends the shattered components of Rick's computer, and finds numerous files pertaining to Nancy, a young student who was raised in an orphanage. The outfit was there as a joke, and Lee Sen was watching it all from a surveillance camera. At that point, the general and her troops stormed inside the address they had located. Another camera, this one put up by Lin, catches her as the general departs. Shortly after, Lee Sen surreptitiously enters the nearby college to observe Nancy from a distance. Lin is also there, posing as a cafeteria employee. A girl seated there calls Nancy racist epithets, after she unintentionally stumbles into a chair. A brawl breaks out, when Nancy gives her a punch to the face while the other students begin taking phone videos. In the end, Lin and Lee Sen assist by dividing the girls, and halting a table until the guard eventually shows up. As soon as Nancy turns to go, she discovers that a cut on her hand is healing rapidly. Lee Sen pursues her and makes an attempt to make friends, but she rejects him. Nancy experiences horrifying nightmares about Andre and an odd experiment that night. Her roommate helps her get back to sleep by waking her up, but she also tells her that this is a regular occurrence, and that she needs to get help. The following day, Nancy visits her spiritualist in a seedy area, and tells him that her nightmares seem incredibly real. Her helper surreptitiously records everything as the spiritualist prepares her for a session. Nancy is put to sleep by the spiritualist using a crystal. Nancy witnesses James conducting experiments on a lizard that regrows its tail during the nightmares. James thinks about giving up on Andre because he is on a stretcher, and the doctors say he keeps rejecting organs. An enraged Andre begins murdering every doctor, and in real life, Nancy begins to fear and has difficulty breathing. She wakes up as the spiritualist stabs her in the chest with a needle as the room's lights flicker. Nancy settles down, and the lights follow suit. The spiritualist claims that she carries a second soul. Inside of her and hands her a pamphlet advertising a potential hypnotist. The spiritualist informs her assistant that Rick's death must have been caused by the cassettes she sold him after Nancy leaves. Nancy gets approached by a group of eerie men, who won't accept no as she is leaving. After she gives one of them a kick to the crotch and bolts, the others start after her, and eventually corner her in their gang's hangout. The gang focuses their attention to Lee Sen, when he suddenly knocks out a person by hitting him in the head with a bat. After a series of mistakes during the fight, Lee Sen takes off his belt to use it as a weapon, which causes his pants to burn. While dragging Lee Sen away, Nancy uses a paint can to divert the men's attention by spraying their eyes. When the gang tries to pursue them after they run through a building, they exit and lock the door behind them. Nancy dismisses Lee Sen's attempt at friendship once more and gets in a cab, but Lee Sen later admits he took the flyer from her. Nancy goes to the Sydney Opera House the following day and tries to see the hypnotist, but the guards won't let her through. Lee Sen abruptly shows up at the door, introduces himself as Nancy's girlfriend, and ushers her inside when she discovers he has taken a backstage pass. When Lee Sen tries to strike up a conversation, a worker removes him because they believe he is another employee. Nancy then makes it to the stage, where she has agreed to be a subject for the hypnotist. After being put to sleep once more, Nancy discovers she is Lin's daughter. When she encounters her younger self in the hospital, she can't see the man's face in the memory, but there he is. The people fled in terror when Andre's forces entered the stage and killed a few of the employees. Subsequently, when police seem to open fire, the general stabs the hypnotist and throws him onto the chairs. Soon after, an officer is slain and a masked Lin enters the stage to engage in combat with some cloth. He loses his mask while taking down soldiers, and Lee Sen witnesses it from the control room. When the general gives Lin a kick that nearly sends him flying off stage, Lee Sen sets off the pyrotechnics to ward her off. The general and Lin are still fighting as they both attempt in vain to seize Nancy. After Lin abruptly spins the cloth to eject the recuperating soldiers, the general attacks Lin once more and throws him through a mirror. The soldiers pursue Lin as she takes Nancy, and he defends himself with the items from the magic performance. Lin knocks down the soldiers and dashes upstairs, when Lee Sen follows the general on the security cameras, and tells Lin over the speakers. He gets in the middle of the general, and pulls her into another battle, making her let go of Nancy. Lee Sen takes advantage of the opportunity to drag Nancy into the elevator and carry her out. When Lin realizes his daughter is safe, he takes a ladder to the roof and diverts the general with a rack. The general pursues him, and while Lin is forced to the brink of defeat, the struggle goes on. He kicks the general to make them both fall, but she uses her daggers to sever the cable he's clinging on while keeping herself from falling. The general cuts the rope once more, and Lin tries to spin to hang on, but he falls through the roof and lands on a patio umbrella. Lee Sen puts Nancy on a boat at the same moment, then turns around to retrieve Lin and flee. Lin brings them to his home a little while later. After leaving Nancy in his bed, he arrests Lee Sen and then shows off the hidden area beneath the stairs. In an attempt to get Lee Sen to talk, he handcuffs him to an exercise machine and sets off a small explosive. Lee Sen clarifies that he is similar to Robin Hood and that the items he took from Rick were truly his. He claims that he only began pursuing Nancy after discovering her library card in Rick's safe. Lin switches off the tiny device, which isn't a bomb after all. He was lying to get him to talk, saying that he won't let Lee Sen go until he verifies his identity. He departs and locks the door. Susan calls Lin when she's in her car. Susan looked into the spiritualist. She taped every visit Nancy paid her, and she later sold the tapes to Rick, who used them as inspiration for his book. Both Lin and her helper are already dead when Lin arrives at the spiritualist's home. The hard drives are also missing when he checks the recording room. Lin receives an alarm on his watch at that precise moment, and he quickly returns home to discover the door unlocked. He enters cautiously and finds Nancy is no longer there. He then enters the hidden room to examine the security footage to make sure Nancy escaped and wasn't taken hostage. He equipped her with a tracker so he could monitor her whereabouts. Nancy deals with fresh memories that have come back to her while she is running across the city at the same time. James came to save her while she was on the operating table about to pass away. Returning to Lin, he learns that Nancy is boarding a plane and contacts Susan to request assistance. He then gives Lee Sen the handcuff keys and some dog food before telling him to avoid this. Lee Sen understands he needs to practice making his hands meet in order to be able to open the handcuffs in this manner. Lin hides in the fireplace since Andre's guys are already making their way outside. As Lin flees the town by way of the chimney, the troops enter and begin investigating the house. Before he goes, he presses a button that causes the house to explode, save for the hidden room in the basement. Lee Sen still drops the key as a result of the shaking. Lin recalls what transpired following Andre's attack, when she boards an aircraft to follow Nancy. Nancy was spared from all memory loss when James gave her his bioengineered blood and a mechanical heart. She gained the capacity to regenerate as a result. Lin persuaded Susan to place his baby in an Australian orphanage, so that he could observe her from a distance while taking on a new name, in order to protect her from Andre. Susan picks Lin up in Hong Kong and returns his badge to him. Nancy discovers a hidden key as she follows her recollections to James' deserted flat in the meantime. This brings up even painful memories, and Nancy witnesses the struggle with Andre. She also at last recognizes her father's face, and realizes that he has always been there for her, hiding behind various guises. The general appears behind her as she sobs. Lin is on his way, but as soon as he sees Nancy being driven off, he loses it. He instantly turns around and begins to pursue them, which prompts the adversary to circle him, with both of their cars in an attempt to destroy his, and force him off the road. Lin accelerates to the point where he appears ahead of them on the road, but the adversary drives him back again. Someone is smearing oil on the road while the chase goes on. Lee Sen then tosses several eggs at the troops' vehicle, obstructing their view of the road ahead. When Lin notices the oil, he slows down, but the general's automobile slips and spins, requiring Lin to stop the vehicle in time to escape. But when he looks inside the car, the tracker is still in Nancy's purse, and the general and Nancy have vanished. Luckily, Lee Sen locates Andre's hiding place by using his hacking expertise to steal a chip from the car. Since Lee Sen is riding his scooter with him, and Lin's car isn't operating, Lin can't go anywhere by himself. Shortly after, the general visits a bank and opens a private vault with the key Nancy uncovered. Before the door closes, she opens a box and discovers an old camera, and it becomes clear that Susan's team set this trap, and the bank employees were undercover spies. When sleeping gas enters, the general begins shooting at the walls and doors ineffectively, killing her soldiers first. After that, Susan, Lin, and Lee Sen receive the camera that was retrieved by a SWAT squad. They come across a recording of James' experiment, in which he discovered starfish genes that are regenerative. He utilized it to create the first mechanical heart and bioengineered blood, which he tested on Andre, his first test subject. The group understands that Andre needs this tape to learn how to create an army of bioroids much like him. Because he was sick, Andre was kept for years in a sterilized room, and he now needs Nancy's blood to heal himself. As Lin and Susan debate the best course of action, Lee Sen examines the camera more closely. Nancy is brought to Andre's hiding place, which is actually an airplane. In the interim, she and Andre are both attached to a device that begins to provide Andre Nancy's blood. In that instant, the general reappears along with her, 2 guards, taking out a doctor since they are, in fact, Susan, Lin, and Lee Sen. After taking another doctor captive upstairs, they head into the lab, where the scientists all freak out and flee. Lin shoots at a glass wall that Nancy and Andre are behind, but it doesn't shatter. The doctor is brought down by Lee Sen, who then demands to see Nancy. The doctor replies that only Andre has the key to open that door. As soon as several soldiers show in, Lee Sen knocks the doctor out and acts like he's comatose. Lin responds to the troops' opening salvo, using their laser weapons to injure them this time. Susan engages in hand-to-hand combat with them, using her knife to kill a few. Sadly, the troops never stop coming, so Lin sets off an explosive, which ignites a small fire. The soldiers are still there, and since Lin's gun runs out of juice, he joins Susan in a hand-to-hand battle. Each soldier falls one by one, and in the ensuing commotion, Lin comes dangerously close to hitting Lee Sen as well. Andre shows up out of nowhere and strikes them both with incredible force. Because of Nancy's blood, he has fully recovered, and he now desires retribution. The 3 of them assault simultaneously, but even their combined might is insufficient to deal even one blow to Andre's powerful and quick body. Andre repeatedly kicks Lin because he wants them to suffer, and Nancy watches in rage as he does so. Her body responds to her feelings, causing the chair restraints to break and disrupting the transfer procedure. As Andre takes up Lin and prepares to hurl him into the generator, Nancy bursts through the glass, firing a shot at Andre that causes him to drop her father. After Susan stabs him in the back, and Lin tries to strangle him with some cables, the group breaks up again, and Andre stabs Susan in the back. Andre's brain is now visible due to Nancy's shot, so Susan stabs him there first. After that, the 3 force him into the generator, but Andre manages to grab onto Lin's arm. Lin is saved just in time to prevent the generator from collapsing by Susan, Lee Sen, and Nancy, but he loses one arm in the process. The system is beginning to fail. After that, the airplane bursts into flames, sending Lee Sen running away from the others while the party flees. When Andre arrives and snatches Lin as the others arrive at the parachute, Lin kicks Susan and Nancy from the ship to save them. As Lin fights against Andre's grip, he recalls all that James told him before passing away next to his bed. There was still some blood in the wire that Andre had stabbed him with earlier, and that blood is what is causing his arm to grow back. This gives Lin the opportunity to break away and launch another attack, stabbing Andre in the fingers and ripping out the synthetic heart. The jet explodes at that very moment, and Lin jumps out of it without a parachute. He is struck by some debris and loses consciousness and his heart. Fortunately, Susan and Nancy are still falling close by, so they use their parachutes to gently lower him to the water. After Susan swims to save him, he surfaced to reconnect with his daughter, and Susan received a call informing her that the files in the camera had vanished. Later, Susan, Lin, and Nancy are enjoying themselves at the theme park. Susan gives Lin the most recent information, while Nancy heads to the grocery store. Because Lee Sen's father was Andre's arms dealer in the lab, he has been exacting retribution and regaining his family's possessions. He attempted to make friends with Nancy because he was raised in the same orphanage as her. When Lin looks back, she sees that Lee Sen was the boy who celebrated Nancy's birthdays with constant kindness. Nancy discovers a photo of the orphanage amidst her food at the same moment, but the vendor has left by the time she turns around. Lee Sen is negotiating with other leaders the following day to see who will pay more for the stolen camera video.